Behind me is the famous Latimer House, one of the most important manor houses in the history of the Second World War. This is the famous steps where the listeners are pictured. Let me tell you the whole story. This photograph of the secret listeners, taken back during World War II, is the exact same spot I was standing in earlier today, and it looks exactly the same now as it did back then. The secret listeners, there was 80 to 90 of these, men and women. 10,000 conversations were taped between 1942 and 1945, creating over 100,000 transcripts which still survive to this day in the National Archives. They worked in a room called the M Room, which was in the basement of Latimer House. 21 million was spent in today's money to set up this top secret operation. Why was it set up? Why was it so top secret? What were they taping and what were they listening to? This is the M Room in the basement of Latimer House. The secret listener is listening in to the conversations above, hoping to get vital secret information. This is the front entrance to Latimer House, steeped in top secret history. Who would think that in World War II this was surrounded in barbed wire? Why? Well, top-ranking German officers and generals were held here. Even Hitler's right-hand man, Rudolf Hess, yes, he was here. Winston Churchill would come here often, and he said no expense could be spared, that the budget was priceless for this mission. There was even a tower for lookout with gun slots. The security was very, very tight. Each room was bugged where these prisoners were, so the secret listeners could listen in and maybe find out some of those top secret things which helped us win the war. This is St Mary Magdalene Church. You just saw outside. It's so beautiful and has so much history. I wonder when Winston Churchill used to come here on regular visits, if he came to any of the services. I wonder if Rudolf Hess, who was held here, sat on one of these pews during a service. Did the men come in to pray? Or were they kept in their rooms? Let's look at this history. MI5 and MI6 were in charge of the organisation. It was hush-hush. Even the Houses of Parliament had no privy to this. And Churchill was here often. It was so important. The Germans were well known for bragging to each other and giving away their top secrets. Behind here, on this side of the house, is a secret tunnel, which is still sealed to this day. Why? Because in the 80s, when the Ministry of Defence sold this wonderful property, there was a clause, and the clause was it could not be opened for 50 years. So to this day, it is sealed. So much secrecy, so much history. The head of the organisation was the senior MI6 officer, Colonel Thomas Hendrick. Across the 3 sites, he had 1,000 staff, 200 intelligence officers, men and women working day and night, and of course 80 to 90 secret listeners. This is him in his office in Latimer House. The room next door was occupied by Rudolf Hess, maybe so he could keep an eye on him. He was one of the most difficult prisoners because of his mental state of health. However, he never gave away any secrets. How did Hitler's right-hand man end up here? On the 10th of May 1941, he took it upon himself to do a solo mission, without Hitler's knowledge, to fly to England. It went very wrong because he started to run out of fuel and had to parachute out of the plane, crashing and landing in Scotland. He only injured his foot, but the mission had failed. He was held at several places, including the Tower of London, and then on to Latimer House. He was eventually transferred to go on trial as a Nazi criminal at the end of the war in the Nuremberg trials. These men are the American intelligence officers known as the OSS. This stands for Office of Strategic Services. They were formed in 1942. The OSS was formed as an agency of Joint Chiefs of Staff to coordinate espionage activities beyond enemy lines for all branches of the United States Armed Forces. The American intelligence officers were sent here to work alongside Colonel Hendrick. Winston Churchill was a great friend of their leader. They were housed in the Great White Farm, which has now been demolished. Winston Churchill would spend many a weekend there. The OSS was disbanded in 1945 and soon after became the CIA that we know today. These British Army intelligence officers are painstakingly looking through all the transcripts, bit by bit, piecing together this vital information, decoding and intercepting all the information. Hitler's secret weapons, the deadly V1s and V2s, which were known as the doodlebugs, this was intercepted. 300 strikes a day were planned. German battle plans, codes used for seas, U-boat and battleship technology, German aircraft technology, even Hitler's personal manoeuvres were just some of the things that these men and women were able to find out. Here is Winston Churchill in his famous office. Look at all that antiquated equipment, those microphones, typewriters, telephones, in and out trays, probably a box of his famous cigars somewhere on that desk. I wonder if he's just come off the phone with vital information from Latimer House. The intelligence officers realised the best way to get the information they so desperately needed, and such important information, by listening to these Germans, was not to lock them up, but to let them talk freely. They were even allowed to walk around the vast grounds of Latimer House. This was the way to get the information. The secret listeners spoke fluent German because they were refugees. They had escaped the Nazis from Germany and joined the British Army. Can you imagine what it must have been like for them, listening in to the very people that had made them leave their homeland, their families? Were they in camps? Were they dead? were they nowhere to be found. It must have been the hardest thing for them, but they worked tirelessly to get the job done. And get the job done, they certainly did. While filming this, I can honestly say it is one of the best things I've done. I've loved it so much. I even got quite emotional thinking about all these people and how differently the war could have ended. Latimer House is still full of top secret information. Maybe when that tunnel's opened, we'll know more. Apparently, it goes on post-war into the Cold War. So, when this is all revealed, we'll be sure to let you know. Until then, we salute every person that served in the World War II.